All right. So, a few things to clear up. I was on the road last week. I was down in the lower 48. So, yeah, trying to keep up on emails with, just doing the driving and the difficulties we have with YouTube. I think I finally got that sorted out. Again, their service has kind of been degraded lately, so I even tried a different platform, but it didn't work much better. But anyway, back on a regular computer with regular uploads, and everything should be fine. Couple cleanup items. People sent me sort of a variety of emails. Obviously, a lot of folks trying to watch the videos were kind of disappointed that didn't work out, but hopefully we're done with that problem. Other issues, there's a lot of things that are kind of spelled out in the syllabus. So if you do have some questions, just check that out. But to confirm or just kind of review a few items, the homework is done in batches. So I'll put up all the homework assignments here, in the next week or two, and that way you'll have all of those in one place, and that will also be where you submit the homework to, just through Blackboard. So you're not going to be emailing that direct. Couple other things. The video for comment. Again, that shows up as a normal assignment on Blackboard, so just do it that way. Don't comment on it in the YouTube comments. They don't care. Um, I'll continue to work with YouTube a little bit. I'm not a big fan of, I've got the premium version, so I don't see a lot of the ads, and I don't have some of the other issues, especially with Google tracking people and stuff. But it's just kind of a necessary evil at this point. I may come up with a different solution. Hopefully, there'll be some other, video hosting platforms out there that will work for us. Crazy times, though. I mean, especially in personal finance, a lot of things that are happening could have ramifications. Some of the issues with, some of the big spending that's going to be taking place. They've always said that this is going to collapse things, create hyperinflation. We'll see. It hasn't done it yet. So, but I was watching another video on just the whole currency issue and sort of relating to Bitcoin, but it was from 10 years ago, and it's the same exact issues that people are talking about now. So who knows what happens? But the one thing you can do is be prepared. In terms of personal finance, having things sort of squared away and not, you know, being in debt. I mean, there's no way to forecast things like COVID, and my apologies to some of you that are impacted. That's what's such a problem with this, you know, particular situation, is that some people are impacted and other people, Amazon and all the big box stores are doing great, and it's sad other people aren't. So there's not a lot of empathy to go around, and it's a mess right now. But let's hope things get resolved. Some of the things we're going to talk about tonight are, we're going to look at cash flow statements. Now, there's two purposes for this. One of which is, just for your own, keeping track of your own finances, and just to see, where you think you are. And then another, other times you may be wishing to get like a mortgage or something like that, and you may need to fill out some of these documents. Unfortunately, the days are kind of gone where you just, send them the file in your own format. Usually you have to complete like a loan application on a drop down menu, within their own software, their own website. It's kind of a drag. But if you have all that information collected already, you're in much better shape. And sometimes if you're going to a small bank, which does happen here in Alaska once in a while, they may actually want to see, your own documents. But typically, for the bigger banks, they've got their own format, and they want it all in a certain way. And so your personal cash flow statement just ends up being the document that you have handy to fill in their document. So cash inflows and cash outflows, right? So simple enough. Um, eh, there's a term that we're going to be talking about a lot, and that's liquidity. Liquidity will show up on the test as well. Liquidity, I think I've touched on it a little bit before. It means it's tied to cash. It's tied to being able to cover your obligations. And this is always going to be a fine balance. You do not want to be the person with 20, 30 grand in your checking account. And that's too much liquidity. That's not a good idea. That's especially in the days of identity theft, but even more, there are some pretty reasonable investments that should be out there. To have cash, in certain countries, I spent a number of years in Turkey, for example, and if you held cash, you're an idiot. It's just dissolving. The inflation rates were so high, and we may be seeing that. Here in this country. This country, on the books, the officially inflation is quite low. Part of that has to do with sort of a flood of you know perhaps Chinese goods that are pretty inexpensive, and therefore it keeps the inflation. They when they're calculating inflation, they look at a number of items to include energy, but also some other consumer items, and then they set a price. The government is always going to want to basically understate inflation. They want inflation to be as low as possible, not only because they want to keep, consumers comfortable, but also the government's got a tremendous number of obligations. One of the primary ones being Social Security or, VA pensions, things like that are all have some sort of index to the cost of living. So if they show, inflation at 8%, guess what? They got to pay 8% more to all these people who are dependent upon those benefits. So they want to keep inflation low. Right now, they're saying inflation's below 3%, quite a bit below, sometimes even neutral. And I'm not seeing it. Everything I need seems to not be horrifically expensive, but certainly going up. I haven't found anything cheaper lately. But anyway, we're off on a tangent there. So inflows and outflows, salaries and expenses. Create a statement. Yep. Net cash flows. So obviously, if this is a positive number, this is good. It's a negative number, this is bad. So, and things have definitely changed over the years. I lived in Spain. Additionally, I was there for a couple, 3 years. And in Spain, it was so funny. A lot of the houses had these maid rooms for basically servants. Back when people could afford to do that, an average Spaniard could have, household help. We've gone from, one person sort of being the breadwinner and supporting, his family to now both breadwinners or both people out working, if it's a couple, and getting by. And now we've gone from both people working and going in debt. So these numbers have slid. So something is certainly going on with society. Um, Here's an example. So this is what she's got after tax income, 2,500 bucks, no investments. Obviously, she's, not a whole bunch of money there. Rent 600, total cash outflows after all her items are done, 2,100, so 400 to the good. So positive number there. Um, Stage in your career path. Yep. That's why again on the term project we're not necessarily going to invest a lot of effort in your current situation. If you're a traditional student just going to college, doing this big master budget is not of much utility because the numbers are quite small. It's not realistic of what you're going to be earning when you're out primarily focused on your career. Now that could change. I mean, different students. Some students are just part time. Some students are, already fully in their career and just taking a few classes. So you'll have to tailor it to yourself. But the numbers about the inflow are definitely going to change as you go through life, and especially now. You know, I'm getting up close to where I could retire, but I don't have any intention of retiring, and just because I enjoy what I do. But so a lot of the when you say a typical path, there is no typical path anymore. Um, Type of job. So you do have some input on that. One of the things when you're doing the term project is there's resources out there on the internet. It used to be a thing called glass door, glass ceiling. Anyway, it would tell what a typical career person in a certain career field would make, and it also used your location, which is important. And that's something to definitely look at before you get too invested in your career field to make sure it's going to be able to work for you. Now, there's some other books called like the Wealthy Barber and some other things where people with fairly modest means are able to generate quite a bit of wealth, but it takes some skill and it takes some planning. So, if your calling is something that doesn't pay very well, I'm not saying not to do it, but I'm just saying you're going to have to be a little more careful and you're going to have to be, it helps to be cognizant. You always hear, I don't know, I don't want to dump on teachers, but they're always talking about how they don't get that much money. That's kind of one of the reasons why you might want to maybe do something else or pursue a different career field. Veterinarians compared to medical doctors, human doctors, the schooling's not that different, but the salary levels are tremendously different. So anyway, look at those things and just go into it with your eyes wide open. Number of income earners in your household. So I kind of hit on that already. Size of the family, the age, certainly, and personal consumption behavior. So again, if you're living alone, you can control it. It is what it is. But if you're married or soon to be divorced based upon different personal consumption behaviors, you got to work on that. But beyond the scope of this class. Now, this is this traditional thing, and this would, in college, the best thing you can do in college is not go into debt. If you can get through with some sort of positive slope, more power to you. But it is, sort of time to concentrate on education and invest in yourself. Um, but yeah, there's certain things that you probably don't need, needs versus wants. So a lot of that will come up in your budget. Career, um, again, this is sort of old school where you get in your career and you stay there and it's this positive slope. Not always. You may get to a certain point where you say, wow, I'm making good money, but I hate this job. I'm job locked or you got a crummy boss and if you don't have the financial, wherewithal, you don't have the financial assets, you may be job locked and you may need to just stick with it, which is not a good place to be. So try to have some flexibility. Hopefully have this positive curve, but be prepared for otherwise. And then here they show it dropping down in retirement and maybe eking up a little bit just due to the interest on your retirement. Who knows? This could be level across. Pardon me. It could just so many variables. So how much value is this chart? Not too much, but you got to have a plan. But whether your plan's going to match this, tough to tell. So budgeting, cash flow statement that's based upon forecasted cash flows. Yep. Do not think a lot of people, and again, I'm stereotyping people as traditional college students, but they're very anxious to be concerned about their credit score and how much money, and you can get into so much trouble. Do not count on the bank. Well, obviously the bank would give me the loan if I couldn't afford it. Oh, the bank will give you the loan. Traditionally, though, what you're going to find probably in life is when you really need the money, the banks aren't interested in giving it to you, and when you've got the money, you're not interested in taking money from the bank because it's usually a higher interest rate. So a credit score is important, to make sure when you do have to borrow money that it's available and that you can get it for the lowest interest rate. So if you see like some teaser rate, some very low interest rates, say for a vehicle or something, keep in mind the only way to get that is to have a pretty respectable credit score. But my credit score jumps around all the time, and it's and sometimes I do things that I know are going to deteriorate it. For example, I was taking out a loan on a piece of equipment, and I put in credit applications with a number of different banks, and I ended up actually going through a state program because it was a farm-related tractor, and they had the best interest rate. But by putting in multiple credit applications with, um, a couple different banks, that makes the credit bureau people, and we'll talk more about this when we get to that section of class, it makes them nervous and your credit score will go down. If you're out shopping for a car, let's say, and you go to three different dealerships and they want to keep you in the game. They want to make it look like this is very serious. They want you to go back and talk to the finance person and so you're just trying to be nice, so you cooperate and you let them run your credit score and your credit application, and you give them your social and the rest of that. You can expect by the end of the day, your credit score is going to take a hit because they're going to see you looking for credit at multiple places. Again, they get nervous. They think this person's, maybe off the rails, taking out multiple loans, and it's an all algorithm based system, and all of a sudden your score is down. So one of the things I did, I whatever, my credit score sometimes in the 800s, sometimes high sevens, but when it's been knocked down, they'll give you a reason. And just out of curiosity, one time I looked and it said, yeah, multiple credit inquiries. And anyway, that will work. Um, so here she is. She's back to her budget. Now, what did she do? Yep, increased her expenses. So I believe that was in the car expenses. Let me roll back real quick. Yep, car expenses went from 200 to 500, and a few other things changed. So anyway, the utility of a budget. If you're, if you're having, oh, I'm sorry, we had the numbers right here. Um, some people really are into it. There's programs, there's online things now that are free and quite useful. Keep in mind that, it's not necessarily free. If you're not paying for it, it means that they're probably selling your data, which everybody's got their own comfort level, but you may get a lot of unsolicited other financial things that you're wondering how you got on their list, how they know so much about you. It's probably, from your Credit Karma or your Nerd Wallet or whatever. Anyway, so that's basically the price you're paying for using that service for free. Anyway, but if you like those types of things and you like to do the online budgeting thing, more power to you. For me, what I try to do is do budgeting on sort of the back end. I like to go back and review everything I've spent, and I try to put everything on credit cards. Number one, because it makes it easier at the end of the year, because just about everything I do is tax deductible because it's related to the different business type things. But also it gives you some just if you end up burning through a tremendous amount of money one month and you're wondering where it all went. If you spend it all in cash, it's kind of hard to track it down. Plus, there's benefits if you're a convenience user of a credit card. If you pay it off every month, but you use your credit card for just about everything, you will accrue a fairly tremendous number of miles and cash back or whatever kind of perks you're looking for on a credit card. So credit cards can be pretty useful if you're using them rather than them using you. If you're the type of person who runs up the credit card and has trouble paying it off, yeah, probably not the way to go, or maybe consider a debit card. But anyway, if you're going to be using, well, it's just a fact of life. You're going to be using some sort of electronic form of payment for a lot of things in your life. You got to go back and review them because you got to look for fraud, identity theft, and the rest of it. And so, if you're already reviewing it for those things, you can also be doing sort of a budgeting, function by looking through and seeing how much you're spending in different categories. So, again, just a review of what she's done. So, the numbers will change, but the categories are not too terribly different. Some of this stuff like clothing, for example, or recreation, it depends on the month. It depends what's going on. So that's why I don't find budgeting that useful. Cellular is dead easy because it's probably a fixed amount. Electricity, water, maybe, but up here, especially utilities in the winter, probably going to be a little higher. Recreation in the summer is probably going to be a little higher, unless you tend to take trips in the winter, which is a good idea as well. So rent, that's going to be steady. But anyway, the utility of this budget with some of these expenses um, varying wildly is going to be difficult. Now, if you are somebody though who wants to take some trips, and when it's time to take the trip, you have no money, putting, say in this case, $600 per month into some sort of separate account and kind of squirreling it away for travel, that's a good idea, and that would definitely balance things out and make your budgeting more useful. But anyway, each to his own. Anticipating cash shortages. So again, it's a balancing thing, too much or too little. You don't want a big chunk of money in your checking account because it's not invested. It's, subject to risk, but you don't want too little because then you're going to start overdrafting things. And one of your first accomplishments should be to get a credit card. I'm not saying you need to use that credit card, but you need overdraft protection on your checking account, which typically means it's going to be tied to a credit card. So, in that case, if you don't like using credit cards, just get the credit card, put it in a drawer, but make sure you have overdraft protection because it will happen. And if you overdraft your checking account, you know, um, you can't say anything, and they just charge you, and you don't have a leg to stand on. So make sure you've got protection. Accuracy of the budget. So again, you would compare it month to month, and then adjust as necessary. And some places too. I know in Germany they used to do it where we paid a level amount for utilities every month, and utilities over there were quite a bit higher. And then at the end of the year there was like this balancing, and it was almost like an escrow account. You'll see that with if you own a home, they can't always get the numbers exactly right in terms of insurance and taxes, so they'll take out a certain amount, they'll put it into an account, and they'll pay those things for you. And then at the end of the year or whatever, they'll adjust it, and then going forward they'll start out with new numbers. All right, forecast net cash flows over several months. Unexpected, like medical, car care, home maintenance. Again, sort of a emergency fund set apart. Typically, I don't like to have an emergency fund within a checking account. I don't like to say, "Oh, I'm going to keep an extra 2,000 or 5,000." That's just not a good way to do it because it's right in there with the rest of your money. For most people, if you don't already have, some sort of 401k or some sort of relationship with a brokerage company, you probably should at a certain point. And any one of those accounts, when you have an account with, say, Fidelity or Ameritrade or whoever, um, you can keep cash, in a cash management account or an asset management account, whatever they want to call it, and it will pay a little bit better interest than a checking account, and it'll also have that physical separation. You can have, say, whatever, 5, 10, 10,000 in cash there, and it's fairly easy to keep track of. You don't have the same sort of identity theft things because there's not a lot of transactions taking place in those accounts, and you can have, two-factor authentication because you're not doing it that often. It's not like a checking account where that'd be just a total hassle. So anyway, I encourage you to kind of do that. Create an annual budget. Yep. And so now she's looking at her errors. You know, some things are higher, but again, trying to forecast groceries, uh, recreation. Yeah, I think that's going to be exceedingly difficult. Sometimes you want to travel certain seasons. That's why I was gone this past week because especially I can't really travel that much in the summer, so I'd like to go in the winter, but COVID's kind of putting a damper in that. Improving your budget. So, don't become overly dependent. Create a budget and stay within it. Yeah, I mean, this is just good training, and this all comes back to that man with he's got those kind of annoying hand gestures in the video. But if you haven't watched that yet, look at that. And the guy he says a lot of things that are correct, and it's this ability to sort of pay yourself first. So you decide what's a goal for your savings every month, and initially it may be a goal of say 10% or something till you establish your emergency fund, for whatever medical or vehicles or whatever things might pop up. And you have that set aside, and then once that amount is achieved, then you start investing that money. But you just do that every month, and so you don't have to stress all throughout the month that, oh, I need to save some money at the no that it was essentially a bill for you. You've already taken care of it, and you're done, and you can spend what's left. And if you do have some extra money, you might add it to your investment fund, or you might do some speculation with it. Anyway, Bitcoin or some of the other coins or something like that. But um, anyway, you can do it guilt free. There's a difference between investing and speculation. So don't, put your 10% all in Bitcoin and think you're investing for your retirement. That's probably not a great thing. I've got a little bit of Bitcoin and a few of the other coins, but I don't fool myself, you know, thinking that that's going to be a permanent thing. But anyway, we'll see what happens with it. Um, so she's pushed it out to a year now. Difference between inflows and cash flows is a positive number, so that's a good sign. And there's going to be some burbles. You can't car expenses, especially unless you've got some sort of fund set aside or you've got a new car. But even those, the all-included warranties always seem to cost you a little bit when you go in there to get some service. So financial planning, this was just one of them, Mint. I've used Mint a little bit, but there's other stuff out there. Again, a couple of popular ones are NerdWallet and God, the other one I mentioned before, I can't even recall it. But anyway, just keep track of your data. Um, you don't necessarily want all that out there. Personal balance sheet. So this is more of a long-term kind of thing. The other one was focused on cash. Um, and this also relates to people's wealth. Somebody, oh, he's got incredible wealth because he's got some huge house. Well, if he's got a huge mortgage on it, he or she is not necessarily wealthy. They've got a big loan, but if you look at their balance sheet is going to be pretty lopsided. Asset wise is only going to be the part that they actually own, the equity, and the liability is going to be that huge amount that's owed. So their net worth may be negative. So balance sheet reflects your financial position at a specific point in time. Now, if you're just keeping track of this and you didn't keep track of cash flow, you may lose that big house. if you don't have the money, and this you see this often with businesses where they can't meet payroll or whatever, and they've got this great business, and you're like, how did that business fail? Well, it's because they didn't have the liquidity. They couldn't meet payroll. They couldn't pay their rent. They couldn't pay their taxes. Even though they had a tremendous, maybe they owned quite a bit. They had something of definitely of value, but they didn't have the liquid cash to pay their bills, and down they went. So household assets, go easy with this. Nobody wants your old stuff basically. So when you value some of your assets, you have to be realistic with what it's worth. And when somebody says, "Oh, I've got whatever this jewelry or something is worth this amount of money," well, it's worth what somebody's willing to pay you for it. And I did this with carpets in Turkey. I took some pretty. I was going back to New Jersey, which is just a nasty place to begin with. But I was going back to New Jersey for just like 3 days, and I was flying all the way there from Turkey. So I took a couple carpets that were probably, I don't know, $300-400 per carpet in Turkey, and they were selling for about $1,500 back in the States. And so I went to a carpet dealer there in New Jersey, and I said, "Hey, would you be interested in buying these?" And no, because he pays about 300 or 400 bucks. His whole expense is he's got to keep a showroom, and he doesn't know that that one particular carpet. He's got to keep this inventory. He's got a ton of expenses, and so the price he's paying for those carpets is about 300 or 400 bucks, same price I paid for them. So now I could sell them on eBay or Craigslist or something, but again, if you're on eBay or Craigslist, that's because you're not going to be paying retail prices. So, maybe those carpets are worth 600 bucks, but they're certainly not worth the, 14 or 15 at the regular retail thing. So, keep in mind, that what things are worth. And this also comes back to insurance. When you have something insured and there's two different types of policies. You have a policy that, people just say my stuff is insured, but if it's insured for replacement value, well, that means, you get to buy brand new stuff. If it's just market value, then it's not much. Which brings me back. I was down in this last week. I went down to Texas and picked up a big horse trailer and drug it up to Montana. Well, that trailer I paid like 13 grand for it because it was hail damaged. I mean, who cares? It was hit on the top with a bunch of hail. It's probably got a bunch of dents, but I haven't even looked at them yet. But anyway, the people who owned that trailer, they had replacement value. So the insurance company gave them like 37 thousand bucks. But the value of that trailer as it sat, well, as demonstrated by market, I bought it at an auction, it was worth 13 grand. So anyway, there can be a huge difference. So when you're valuing your assets, the long and short is just what you could actually sell it for, not what you paid for. Bonds. So we'll talk more about bonds and stocks, but bonds are a loan from an entity, typically a corporation, maybe a municipality, government. Anyway, they it's just something you purchase. You you know give the entity say $20,000, and they start making payments to you, and at the end of the term, let's say 20 years, they give you your $20,000 back. You don't have any sort of ownership position. Stocks, you own a small chunk of a company. You have an equity position. And if you have mutual funds are typically comprised of equities, stocks. Sometimes they can have bonds, but most typically stocks. So the difference between the two is stocks are, I have lots of stock and no bonds because of the way, well, it gets more intricate, but um, wealth generation stocks are definitely the way to go. Mutual funds, so instruments that sell shares and invest. What they do is they get a whole conglomeration of stocks, And it can be done however they want, but typically a whole bunch of different stocks. They put them into a fund and they sell them as a product. So it just makes it easy for you to invest in the stock market. It gives you some diversification because you don't own a single company, which can be good or bad. If you owned Apple or Amazon individually, that's not necessarily a bad deal. But if you own a mutual fund, they may own, a little bit of Apple, a little bit of Dell, a little bit of Gateway, whoever else is around. And that way, if one of those companies goes under or one does better than the other, you've got sort of a balance. Real estate holdings, huge. Not only mutual funds are fun to look at the balances, but you can't live in it. You can't, hunt on it. You can't do a lot of stuff with it. So real estate is, you're probably going to have a combination of investments, a portfolio, but real estate, advantageous in terms of what you can do with the capital gains, which means when you make money, you buy some shares for $20, you sell it for 30, you made a capital gain of $10 a share. Real estate, you buy a piece of property for 200,000, you sell it for 300,000, you make 100 grand in capital gains. But the difference between these two is real estate, especially if you're an owner or occupier, you lived in it 3 out of the past 5 years, you can keep all of that money. Mutual funds, you're going to be paying tax on that profit. Anyway, so we're talking about a lot of different subjects here, but we'll review every bit of this throughout the course. But these are just things that might show up on a balance sheet. So real estate can be, the house you're living in. It can be some land. It can be some income property or rental property. Lots of different things. Liabilities. So this is a classification that we're going to stick with throughout the course. And short term or current in this case is going to be less than a year. Long term is going to be over a year. That definition of short being less than a year and long, over a year, that's going to be consistent because that's also what the IRS uses. So let's say you make, a huge amount of money on Bitcoin, and oh, by the way, they track all that now, so you're going to be paying tax on it. If you sell it within 1 year, that is called a short-term gain. If you held it for over a year, that's a long-term gain. Short-term gain is going to be taxed at your current tax rate, let's say, 28% or something. If you hold it long term, it's going to be taxed at typically around 15%, so about half the tax. So it does make a difference. And liabilities, they're saying current liabilities, debts that you have to pay within a year, long term, over a year. And net worth, which we keep coming back to, the difference between what you have and what you owe. Easy to do, and it's motivational. When you see your net worth increasing, you're more apt to save more, which is a good thing. Again, I know some people, especially right now, are struggling, but anyway, it is what it is. Hopefully, you'll get yourself in a position. We'll get out of this position, and where people are getting back on the right track. So this Stephanie, again, she's got her cash. So we're not talking huge numbers here, but she's got 3 grand in stock. Good on her. I would think it'd probably be more appropriate that she have 3 grand in mutual funds. A little bit more diversification, a little bit more. The good thing about mutual funds is you can deal with those people in whatever way you want. You can say, I want to allocate $100 a month, and then I want to change it to 125, and you can do that all online. And you've got a person who manages that mutual fund who takes care of that, and they make those buy sell decisions. And you got to do some research to make sure you get a good fund manager, but once that's done, you're kind of on autopilot. You can sit back. Whereas stocks, you have to kind of keep track of things, so it can be more work. It can be fun if you want to do it, and you can definitely probably do better in individual stocks if you invest the time. and have some skill. Or, I actually pay for a subscription service. I mean, I do look at some of the stuff myself, but it's important. You want to make sure that um, you get a second opinion on those types of things. Um, Credit card balance shouldn't have one. So, again, pay it off each month. And to have money invested in stocks and yet have a credit card balance, credit cards, we're talking 20% plus interest. You're not making that in the stock market over the long term. So you're kind of fooling yourself that you have investments and you're carrying a credit card balance. You should not have both of those. Before you start investing, get that to zero and keep it at zero as best you can, you know. All right. Changes in personal balance sheet. Yep. So here she's buying the new car. 20,000 bucks. But does she own that car? It's not showing up as a debt. Anyway, liabilities, current liabilities, and long-term liabilities. There's that car loan. So anyway, vehicles are, get the vehicle you need, not necessarily the vehicle you want until you get other things kind of squared away. Impact to the economy. Well, I've talked about that multiple times here. Um, the way you can get around or minimize the impact is to takes time, but if you can get things squared away and there may even be some things where you might make some different career choices based upon the stability of certain industries. Relationships with cash flows and wealth. So, yep. But there's so many moving parts in here, you know. And this gets back into homes. Do you always want the biggest, largest homes? There's a certain sweet spot for homes. It depends on the market, but if you've got $1 million home, there's just a very few people who can buy that from you. If you've got, um, a moderate sized home, or maybe a couple, one is a rental, those are both fairly liquid in terms of real estate. No real estate is very liquid, but there's always going to be a lot of demand for those mid-priced homes. Whereas on the high end, those things don't change hands very often. Yep, weak demand. Yep, yep. So again, some sort of diversity, and we'll talk more about this when we get into investments, but to have everything in real estate or everything in the stock market, and especially everything in cash, you know, it's best to have a balance. But if it's going to be inflationary times, to have it in cash is a dangerous position. Cash inflows minus outflows. Yep. Allows monitoring. Liquidity ratios. Yep. I never been asked much about this on loans. I mean, they will look at your assets and liabilities, but it also it's very much situational dependent or location dependent. Somebody who's living in a very high real estate area may have a completely different set of parameters that they're judged by. Some of the amounts that people would pay towards real estate in some of those areas are just astronomical compared to normal communities. So debt to asset ratio. But again, not all debt is the same. Credit card debt is horrible. Real estate debt, if you're borrowing against a home for 2.75%, but you're able to make 10% in the stock market, you'd be foolish to, you know, race to pay off that real estate debt. The real estate debt, that interest is tax deductible. It's quite low. And that excess money, as long as you're not, spending it on stupid stuff, if you're investing it, that's how wealth is generated. Savings rate. All right. So that's just a little bit on budgeting. Like I say, I'd be lying to you if I told you that, well, I'd be a very boring person if I sat there and you know, manage my money down to the penny. I've had friends who've done that, and it's not pleasant. But you got to do what you got to do. Um, anyway, I've tried to do more of a review, and I think that works out better. Time value of money concepts. So everything we're going to talk about in this chapter, if you really spend some time on those Excel spreadsheets with the time value of money, it is so much more valuable because it takes a little bit to really appreciate just how powerful it is. So anyway, this is what they're saying. Influenced by time. These are all just statements, but until you actually see the numbers, see that change, you just can't comprehend it. There's different ways and different things that you may use to compute. There's going to be a lot of terms that you may get kind of wrapped around about in terms of present value of a dollar or future value. Um, Computers are not going away. It's not cheating to not use a stupid table. They used to have slide rules and then they had tables, and now they've got basically applications, apps on a somebody's website, and they're usually a lot more comprehensive. Um, but if you're trying to save up for a house and you need a certain amount of money, to establish that down payment, if I start saving now, if I do it with a lump sum, what you'd be looking at is the future value. If you want to do it the other way, you start out with that lump sum at the end, and you can do the present value where you calculate it backwards. But it's don't get too wrapped up about equations or the rest of that because you're not going to be doing it. You're not going to be doing, for example, complex math problems on the exam because it's not realistic. You don't do that in real life. Real estate guys always used to have these tables on the back of their business cards so that they could, calculate payments. It doesn't happen anymore. You just use your smartphone or whatever you got and you figure it out. Annuities. Annuity is just a fancy word for a series of equal payments. Typically, annuities are often talked about in the insurance realm, and what they do with annuities there is, again, you may find a component of your retirement. You may say, "Hey, I want an extra, $500 a month." Well, you can go out and find a product, basically buy an annuity. You give this insurance company or whoever a certain amount of money, and give them 10, 15 grand, and probably more than that. But anyway, they start making $500 payments to you every month. and you know, that's basically rent on the money that you have given them. And it's it's in an insurance concept, it's sort of the opposite of insurance. Life insurance, you have to die to collect on it. With an annuity, they keep paying you as long as you continue to live. So it's positive in that regard that you're betting on yourself. But anyway, annuity is just a series of equal cash flows. But in practice, it's typically used in the insurance realm. I don't have any annuities, and I don't know that I'd really recommend them. I can't give you guys, financial advice. Obviously, I'm not in that position, but I wouldn't do it myself because it's a semi-complex product, complex enough that you got to go to an insurance person to buy it, a commission salesperson. And anytime I'm paying a commission, I do not like that. And I anyway, it eats up your investment. And also, insurance companies aren't typically the best investment people. They're usually too conservative. They usually don't get the yields that true investment companies do. So I don't like to give them my money. Anyway, um, compounding. So this is earning interest on interest, and that's what generates things. Let's say you've got $100 in the bank and you can get paid simple interest of 10%, over the year. So simple means no compounding. So at the end of the year, you gave them $100, you get $110, total value at the end of the year. If it's compound interest, well, the first day you have $100. If it's compounded daily, on the next day you got $100 plus your interest from that first day, and the next day, and so by the end of the um, year, you may have, let's say, $115 that you're earning interest on. So you've outpaced that simple interest because you're earning interest on interest. Now, the longer time you give that process to work, that's where things really kick in. So that's why saving when you're young, not being mired in student debt, not doing some of those things, that money you put away can really do a lot for you. Conversely, or I guess similarly, if you are in your 50s and you say, "Oh, I need to start saving for retirement," that ship has sailed. The compound interest isn't going to help you out that much because you're only giving it, 10, 15 years to act. So small amounts early on are much better than, doubling up to catch up when you're in your 50s. Um, so future value. Again, you don't have to get, if there's a question in the homework, you don't think that the book is your only resource for this. They don't have some, copyrighted tables. It's the concepts are the same. You could Google or whatever your preferred search engine, future value of a dollar. Um, Jump into one of those online calculators and get the numbers because that's what you're going to have. When you're looking at purchasing a house, you're not going to have your textbook with you. You're going to have, what's available generally online. And so the answers are going to be the same, whether you get them out of a formula, which is the worst case, based upon the effort, a table, which, are kind of complex, or an online calculator, which is easy and typically in your pocket. Future value interest rate. So don't let these guys wrap you up with all these, acronyms and all the rest of it. Just think about it conceptually. Future value of a single dollar amount. So, it's not a series of payments. It's if I got $10 now, how much will it be worth later? One simple thing. This isn't testable because it's not exact, but there's a concept, the rule of 72, and it's just friggin' magic. So what you do is, how long will it take for my money to double? And I'm getting, let's say, 10% interest. You know, some of you might race to pull out a calculator or do something. If you know the rule of 72, all you have to do is get the interest rate divided in 72, and that will tell you how many years to double, which is, it's kind of a fun fact. So in this case, 7.2 years. So if you've got money in the stock market and stock market's typically getting about 10% a year, and let's say you can squirrel away 100 grand on 7.2 years at prevailing rates, and this is a lot of generalities that you're going to get 10% exactly, but let's say you get close to it, you got 200 grand in 7.2 years. So anyway, rule 72 is kind of interesting. This guy in 5 years, if you invest 5% now, 4% return, find the interest rate, time period on the table. So feel free to use the table if you want. That's how people used to do it, but it's not. It just kind of makes your head spin. N period, interest, years. Anyway, computed future value. And you'll see some of these numbers change. A lot of times that's a lowercase n, and the numbers are close enough. Here's on the table here. They did it by what do you call it? If you're $1.50, who cares? $1.74 actually. Impact of a longer period. So they're trying to demonstrate what that chart can illustrate far, far quicker. And if you're in this sort of business, you might actually, develop an Excel spreadsheet. Some of you are probably better at it than I am. But anyway, it's not hard. It's not that difficult. What is difficult is getting your head around just how powerful it can be given time. Impact of a higher interest rate. So keep in mind all these numbers, they can work for you or against you. Some people pay interest, some people earn interest. So the power of the time value of money can be your friend or your enemy depending on if you've got that credit card, like I say, at 28 or 20 some percent interest. It is going to it's going to impact your life. So again, some charts that are maybe a little bit impressive, but you stretch this out over your lifetime and you really see some changes. But compounding, and that means earning interest on interest. We kind of talked about that. Yep. If you're just making the minimum payment, that's only keeping you out of trouble with the bank in terms of late payments, but you're in a death spiral in terms of interest. Well, this is what kills me about the authors is they treat all debt the same. It's not. Credit card debt that's not tax deductible is horrific. Um, Mortgage debt that's low that enables you to perhaps buy another piece of property and build a portfolio is not an issue. Especially, you don't want to. There's been some ripples in Bitcoin lately, and they said one of the things was people leveraging. Leveraging means using borrowed money to invest. Well, first off, Bitcoin is not investing. Bitcoin is speculation. And then second, using borrowed money for speculation. I mean, but that's going to be the problem. When you all get out there, these are going to be your peers. Some of these people have just got throttled in the Bitcoin market. They got stopped out. They couldn't pay their debt. Now they're in a horrible financial position, and so they're looking for a bailout. You don't want to be one of those people, but just having those people in society is going to be a problem because they're going to be looking for money and anyway. Discounting the process of obtaining value. So discounting, just again, it's sort of a technical term that's, I guess it's intuitive, but it just means looking backwards, present value of a dollar amount. So, I need $10,000 in the future. I'm going to take it back to now. Some of you may be pretty familiar with these terms, but knowledge of the terms is not that important. Understanding the concepts is important. So present value tell you the amount you must invest today to accumulate a certain amount of some future. So it could be either a single amount or a series. Um, anyway, you've got to know an interest rate and you've got to know the period. You've got to know how much time. Yep, interest rate, number of years. Present value table or whatever. Or use a financial calculator. Or, you know, again, you don't see too many financial calculators anymore. You do see a lot of apps. So if you just Google present value of a dollar, you'll see a calculator, or you'll probably see it application driven. You know, they won't use complex terms. They'll say, you know, in order to save for a home, you know, how much you need for your down payment, and what they're doing is a present value calculation, but they're just making it a little more user friendly for you. Again, it kind of bugs me that these people are, you know, 5 years to get 50,000. If that's a real estate transaction, I would try to get in on a smaller house and then flip it and move on to my next house. If you're saving up, you know, just again, another example. Let's say your dream house is, you know, $500,000, and you know you can't get there. Well, you've got some options. You could sit on the sidelines and wait 5 years and accumulate your down payment. But in that time, that price is probably appreciated. And let's say it's appreciated, it's now worth $1 million. So you were saving that whole time, and but you were kind of on the sidelines because you weren't invested in real estate. If you would have bought, say, a starter home, you know, you want that dream home for 500 grand, you can't get it, so you buy the $250,000 one. Um, Now, you know, at the end of 5 years, you sell that one. Your $250,000 home, let's say it also doubled, so it's worth 500,000. You know, you haven't got the dream home, but you weren't left, you know, sitting on the sidelines. So the one person who did nothing is $1 million away from that dream home. You who had the small home and were in the market, you know, you're 500,000 away. So anyway, if that makes sense to you, but um, to delay and not just keeping your money in cash and letting inflation kind of erode the buying value of it. If you have $100,000 and it's all in cash, at the end of the year you'll still have that $100,000, but the buying power of it, if inflation is say 3 or 5%, the buying power of it will only buy you, you know, $95 to $97,000 worth of stuff as compared to the year before. So you need to be careful. You need to be cognizant of inflation, and when people are printing money quite, you know, and they got to do what they got to do with the COVID, but there is going to be inflationary pressure generated by just cranking up the money. So be careful. Present value of a dollar. So here they use the calculation, and then they use the formula, and numbers are going to be very similar. Always make sure you apply common sense to what you're looking at. If something looks, you know, ridiculous, these numbers look quite, you know, normal. You know, you use your 50,000, you use your magic factor, and 35,000. That makes sense. If I start out with 35,000 and I apply, you know, interest to it, I would expect it to appreciate to, you know, so it seems logical. But if the numbers are drastically wrong, you know, if you're just blindly plugging numbers in, you could end up with some uh, strange results. Future value of annuity, so a sequel series of equal cash payments. But future value, you're aware how to calculate that, and the annuity part just means the series of equal payments. Interest rate and number of payments. So if you're playing the lottery, you probably this whole thing probably passed you by. Um, Lottery people who invest in the lottery, and I say that jokingly, it's not really an investment. Um, anyway, that's why a lot of those folks end up with very little money because, by definition, by playing the lottery, they didn't really understand some of the concepts. So again, there's not a lot of skill in using the tables. You just pull these numbers out. It's not a whole lot different than just plugging the numbers into a computer. It's not super intuitive. The formula maybe has a little bit more intuitive to it, but um, you're still um, relying on some magic. Present value of annuity, so now you're taking it back. And there you go. Yeah, sometimes when they make you those offers, but you have to know what sort of interest rate would be there so you can compare things correctly. So you could look on any of the real estate sites, any of the brokerage sites, you know, they'll have fairly useful items for real estate purchases and things like that. And the good thing about those types of sites is they also do more than just the payment. Let's say you know buying a house in the MOA, the municipality of Anchorage, and you think, oh, I can afford a $1,500 home payment, but when you add in the property taxes and the insurance and the rest of that, um, these tables won't generally reflect that, but on most of the real estate calculators, they will at least be a reminder, or they may actually have access to tax data and will, show you that really your payment's going to be about 2 grand a month. So that's what you need to be, looking at because there's other expenses. And so that's some of the beauty of having a specifically tailored calculator. Again, these get to be personal choices. But the point is to start investing as soon as possible. And as I said, the first step is to get rid of your consumer debt. Um, get rid of, depending on the interest rate, your student loan debt if you have some. That's really what's happening right now. Is a lot of folks, because of student loan debt, are delaying purchasing and they're just delaying life, and it's not good. And there's the homework, and that's it.